Esta serie documental presenta la investigación, la experiencia y el ejemplo de vida de hombres y mujeres, activistas de una transformación profunda en la sociedad. Sus mensajes hablan del sentido de la Tierra como sistema integral y señalan un horizonte de conciencia nueva y de mayor sensibilidad. Los invitamos a beber del manantial de sus palabras y así poder escuchar las muy diferentes voces de la Tierra.
Nora Bateson es cineasta, escritora, educadora y asesora política. Su trabajo integra los campos de la biología, la cognición, el arte, la antropología, la psicología y la tecnología de la información. Acuñó el término simmátesi para referirse al proceso de interacción y aprendizaje mutuo contextual que se lleva a cabo entre distintos seres vivos. Ha reunido a un notable equipo de pensadores, científicos y artistas internacionales para generar una forma innovadora de investigación transcontextual. Como educadora, desarrolló planes de estudios para escuelas, dirigiendo proyectos multimedia sobre comprensión ecológica e intercultural.
I think it's important to recognize there's a long history of looking at science and nature through the lens that includes the artistic perception and ways of seeing relationship and interrelationships. More importantly, it opens up fields of inquiry. What are the questions being asked? What is the research that's being done? And if that question doesn't hold enough complexity, then whatever gets found won't either. The responses will be filled with confusion. The arts are so important because they bring in the relational process. Okay, that's one piece. Another piece is that, of course, the arts are meeting us in our own complexity. Okay, so the arts are speaking to more than my intellect, speaking to my emotional self, speaking to my physical self, speaking to my memories and my imagination, the aspects of me that are not verbal, that are not analyzing in that way. Your height, your weight, your birthday, your name, your tax number, that kind of information serves at one level. But it doesn't serve at the level of my complex being understanding and becoming familiar with the complexity of the world around me. For that, you need something else. In the question of how do we begin to see something new, sense something new, perceive something new, so that we can respond in new ways and make sense in new ways of our world. This is a big question. It seems like so many of the roots of change making and the possibilities, the actions, take us back into where we were before because the thinking hasn't changed. Right? Einstein said, no problem can be solved at the same level of understanding that it was created. If the thinking doesn't change, the process of responding doesn't change. So you might create a new economy that's a circular economy or a sharing or a caring or a green economy. But if the basic principles of epistemological understanding of our world haven't changed, it doesn't matter what shape the economy's in. There will be a way to corrupt it or to maneuver it back into creating piles of wealth for some people and none for others. It's the arts that are going to ask us to perceive things outside the margins of our usual perception. And in doing so, we go beyond the limits of what we thought it was possible to know. I really feel like as a species, especially in the Western modality of learning to be in our world, the way we've learned to be in our world is only within a particular set of sensitivities. And we just don't see or perceive outside of that. And so we're desperately trying to make the world different, but we see the same world and respond in the same way. So the question of what are we perceiving and how do we respond to those perceptions? And for me, that is really about, can we perceive the interdependencies that we live within? And that's the shift. And the interdependencies that exist in nature that connect, at a very obvious and cliche level, the birds and the bees, okay? It's so cliche, and yet, without a deeper understanding of that interdependency, our response tends to be to try to fix the bees or fix the flowers or fix the birds or tend to this or tend to that, when in fact, what needs tending is the interrelational dependency. And that's a shift. The rhetoric and the discourse right now is about, we live in an interconnected world, and we have to be able to see that interconnectedness. But frankly, that's not enough. When you think about interconnected, what do you see in your mind? Most people will find that deep down, what they see is like nodes connected by lines. All right? Now, think of a forest. There's no nodes and lines in there. What's happening in a forest is interdependency. And that's at another order than interconnectedness. As long as we're still looking at those nodes, we can push them around, But when we drop down into interdependency, that's when it's not about complexity, it's within complexity. So for me, that's where my work is going right now. This is not about mapping the complexity. It's about familiarity with the interdependency, and that takes all my senses and sensorial experience that I don't even know yet. It's important to remember, it's not like there's humans and nature. We are nature. It's been years, it's been decades, it's been centuries that there's been an attempt to externalize and make explicit, to draw maps of the interdependency, to, systemic maps, to illustrate the aboutness of the system. And we don't have time. Okay, there's just not time to teach 7 billion people systems theory and complexity theory. And not only that, a lot of the people who are already working in systems and complexity theory have externalized it so much that this notion of within is unreachable for them. But instead, the way it is now, the education system divides everything into pieces, and then we say it's interconnected. What I have found is that when I'm in the taxi, or when I'm with little kids, or when I'm working with politicians, or when no matter where I am, if I start talking about the interdependency in a way that relates to people's lives, they get it. They know their lives are complex. They get it. So one of the ways in which I have found to begin that is to talk about identity and the self. And just, who are you? Who am I? And recognizing that self is complex. I am a mom, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, I'm a lover, I'm a professional. I am my language, I'm my education, I'm my tax number, I'm my generation, I'm whatever my gender is and how that works in the world. I am my culture. I'm my experiences. I am 100 trillion organisms that are connected to the ecology. I am the walking past of colonial history. I'm the walking future of what could be, right? Who am I? So in that invitation, there is this moment to moment, all day, every day interaction with the furniture deliverer or the bus driver or my children or myself, my husband, my body, the trees, my plants, the park, my garden, where there's an invitation to meet the world in my own complexity. It's not like that's anything new. So what invitation is that as an art form of living, okay, to respond to the people that we meet, including ourselves, in that complexity? That bumps us out of linear thinking without going into a big, detailed, philosophical process around the deep mechanical metaphors that we live within. And those mechanical metaphors are so sneaky. They're ghosts, and they sneak into everything we do. And the next thing you know, you hear people talking about the ecology like it was a big, giant, squishy green machine. The danger of that is seeing nature through a lens that's informed by mechanistic thinking means we're going to see everything as a mechanism. So I think it starts by recognizing that we can ask this question of really, where's the edge of the self? Where's the edge of you or of me? Do I end with my skin? Do I end with my family? Do I end with my ideas? Do I end with the microbiome that goes out into the ecology? Where's the edge of me? And if I want to talk about my health or my wealth or my status, where is the edge of that notion of mine? Can I be healthy if my family's not healthy? Can I be healthy if my community is not healthy? Can I be healthy if the biosphere is unhealthy? There's no, you have to go through 10 years of theoretical training to get it. No, we're here now. And the way that together we can respond and perceive to our changing world, that's the key. Where are we with that? Are we willing to discover it together? Are we willing to learn how to be in a new world together? I hope so. And it means that I need to do whatever I can to create the conditions where it's possible for the people that I'm in communication with to help each other. We're in a changing world now. Things are in transformation economically, ecologically, culturally, personally. I mean, how many people do you know in your life right now that are in crisis? And so, how do we support each other right now? Emotionally, psychologically, scientifically, politically, economically, in terms of our health, physically, sexually, right? The gender thing is like wide open. And what about the kids? What should we tell our children? How should they be prepared to live in a world that we don't know how to live in? As a mom, this is a big one for me, of recognizing that I need to create relationship in an intergenerational way in my own house that allows for us to learn together how to be in this changing world, to watch it together, to try to make sense of it together, and to allow my children to share in my discovery, but also share in the confusion, and not exclude them from that as though I am an authority and I'm going to make everything okay for them. I can't make everything okay for them. And it's like promising them Santa Claus, like That's not okay. They have ideas. It's their future. It's their perception is free of so many of the cages and traps that my perception is limited by. So I better listen to them. I better explore with them so that I can see new things. That's where it is. It starts at home and with a willingness to learn together. My father did that for me. And I never had the sense that he was right because he was the dad. What I had the sense was that we would explore ideas together and that he could change his mind and learn from me. And when he learned from me, I learned from him what it looks like to learn. It wasn't about being right. It wasn't about being the authority. Real respect between generations, I think, is generated in that exploration together. I wish more people could feel how that felt, to not be at odds with the other generations in that way. There's no wall. There's no time for walls there. This approach to solving problems, the notion of identifying a problem, creating a strategy, and coming up with a solution is a linear process. When my doctor sees that I have a symptom, it's wonderful if I get a salve or something for that symptom. But to not understand that that symptom is part of a larger set of contextual processes in my life is a huge blind spot. The real revolution right now is about claiming and authorizing the possibility of responding in indirect ways. Our world wants to do everything directly. The language is ever more precise. The machines we make ever more precision. We're looking for precision and closer, smaller levels of precision. But so much of what is actually happening is happening in these contextual, relational fields. And if you respond at one level, there's an error. I don't know how else to say it. It's an error to not take into consideration the contextual information. We are in a moment right now with our relationship to science that is dangerous. And in the 1600s, we had the scientific revolution, and in that time there were methodologies that were developed to keep science clean of witch doctors and superstitions and, all kinds of woo-woo. And so it became at that time kind of part of the rules of the game. You need to have scientific research that is objective. You need to have evidence that's measurable. You need to have research projects that are repeatable. You need to, in order to have this scientific base of knowledge, those things had to be there in relational information. It matters who's looking, right? You have to observe the observer. And it is gonna change because the system is moving and responding and shifting. Living systems don't stay the same. Maybe they change slowly, but they still change. There's no way to possibly measure it. You can't get the same answer twice. You can't measure it. You can't be objective. You can't create a definition. If you have a need to produce those numbers and those evidence-based inquiries, you cannot actually do the work that needs to get done, which is at a systemic, relational, complex level. So we have a problem right now. And that is that the existing set of scientific requirements have limitations. And no one is really willing to admit that. They are also really beautiful, right? Nothing wrong with pulling things out of context and studying them. But there is something wrong with not noticing that if you put them back in context, you get completely different results. So it's a problem. And now everyone is, is there climate change? Is there not climate change? Well, it depends on which research you look at. Come on. Is nuclear power going to save the world, or is it going to kill us all? There's lots of research to say both are true. Genetically modified organisms. Are they going to kill us all, or are they going to save us from poverty? ADHD medication for children. Does it save the children from a life of despair and depression, or does it make them into drug addicts and destroy their microimmune system? It's an adjustment not only of scientific requirements, but of cultural requirements. It's an admission of saying this relationality matters, which is going to naturally pull us out of mechanistic thinking. And I don't know where the beginning and the end of that loop is. Which comes first? I'm interested in how they might be in relationship to each other. How might the inquiry of reductionist science be changed by a recognition of relational information? That's exciting. Let's go there. The early explorations in thinking around cybernetic possibilities were based on the kind of experiment of thinking like a machine, because that pulled the limits of perception out of the established human limits of the time. I see why people get confused. And they also are getting confused because there's a lot of crossing between technology and life right now. Coming of AI, the building of robots, the implementation of biotics and mechanistic prostheses and things in the body, and where are those lines? What is the difference between a living and a non-living system? So I don't want there to be proofs of what life is and proofs of what life isn't. I just want to know that people are willing to care, right? What they know and what they don't know, what are you going to do about that? But what we do need to be concerned about is how much does it matter to them? How much does it matter to us? How much do we care? Because we can look back and we can say, we made those mistakes because we didn't know any better. But did we care that we didn't know? So that's one level. Now, the double bind that we are in now at ecological, societal, cultural, economic level is the double bind that in order to survive, I need to pay my rent, I need to buy food, I need to buy clothing, I need to go to work, I need to take part in the systems that are the established systems that exist now. I send my children to school, I ride in cars, I eat food that's produced by agriculture that is destroying the soil. I am utilizing whatever, furniture that was made in ways that was destructive to the environment and to humanity. So that exploitation is actually destroying the possibility for survival. But in order to survive, I have to take part in that process. So it's a double bind. I can't survive if I don't eat and pay rent and go to work and feed my children and so on. But if I do that, I'm taking part in systems that destroy the future. So how do we get beyond that? And what kind of thinking, what kind of processes are necessary to get to a new level of responding to that? We have people who are trying to restore the soil, but they're doing so inside a system that's undermining everything they're trying to do. People who are trying to change governmental policy, or trying to change banking, or trying to change the education system. But all of these things are being done in a larger set of understandings of life in which we all need to partake in these systems continually. That next level of wisdom that we need to get to is a creative imperative. It's an improvisational imperative of responding to who we are in the context of our lives in a new way. Together, what is that wisdom? I think that wisdom has to do with recognizing not only a kind of political agenda shift and a revolutionary effort that's needed. I mean, it's time to be angry. It's time to have your heart broken. It's also time to recognize the comedy of errors of this. It's time to recognize the sensuality and the extreme beauty of all that humanity has done. It's time to be in all of those experiences of life at the same time and say this: everything that came before. We have to first recognize that we don't have those answers yet. We haven't done this yet. So we've got to go further. And that's not a superficial act. That's a recognition at a much higher level that we're not ready. In the moment that we are right now, in the discourse that we're having right now, we're not ready yet. And we actually really need to get ready fast. It's now.
Distintas voces, matices, percepciones sobre una misma indagación. La complejidad de la vida, la enorme velocidad de los procesos humanos, la vitalidad creativa, el entendimiento abriéndose a múltiples dimensiones, la trama misteriosa de corazones que laten al pulso de la Tierra.
Es decir, tendemos a reaccionar, a culpabilizar. Y yo diría que no vamos a encontrar grandes soluciones en los tiempos por venir, porque la crisis que estamos atravesando no es una crisis de sistemas de creencias, no es una crisis de sistemas sociales, es una gran oportunidad para darnos cuenta de las limitaciones de la mente humana y de cuán limitada es para enfrentar complejidad.
Very deep scripts that inform, all the way down to the physiology of sexual attraction, right? It's deep. What is it to be in my femininity, in desire? What am I attracted to, and who is attracted to that? And does that actually have anything to do with me? Or is it just the inheritance of cultural understandings of what femininity is? And how would I know the difference? And who am I inside this? All these movies that have shown what it is to be a woman, or what the feminine is, or even the mythologies of goddesses and warriors and the masculine and the feminine and the... But is that real? Is that what's actually natural? what is actually natural? Because maybe we're capable of more than we thought. And I don't really want to write that script in of these are the limits of human nature, when the very thing that I'm spending my life working on is expanding those limits of perception and response. So what service is it to say human nature means that it has shown us that humans are greedy, humans are violent, humans are selfish, humans are, right, all of that stuff. And I have to say, well, in the circumstances that humans have been in, they have responded in that way. Is that human nature? Our language doesn't. Separates things, breaks things, defines things. Our education system, the monetary system, the medical system, the political system, the furniture store is set up in departments. We think of members of the family as parts of a whole, like a machine has parts. But when you're working on a pickup truck, you can exchange the parts. And when you're working with a family, you don't exchange the parts. They're not parts and wholes. Those are relational processes, interdependencies that run far and wide into many contexts of being. You can't just fix the child or fix the mom. Right? We're existing in many more contextual processes than that. It's just doing this, having this conversation, making this public, keeping talking about it. And I work in lots of different circumstances, and you just keep illustrating it. Illustrated in poetry, illustrated in filmmaking, illustrated in music, illustrated in food, illustrated in intergenerational communication, illustrated in the classroom, illustrated in art, illustrate it every way you can, and just keep at it.
Algunos seres humanos comienzan a sentir la necesidad biológica de estar en armonía con los demás seres vivos y de ayudar a que la inteligencia de la Tierra emerja en cada vez más individuos, de modo que juntos podamos percibir el maravilloso diseño que somos en un todo y parte de la Tierra y del universo.